happy to have you on our call on such an important day. I posted this picture down here, this little heart, because I saw an image of Valentine's candy. And I don't know about most of you on the call, but that has a strong neurological impact on me when I see that picture. It takes me way back.
Eric, I smelled them. The moment I saw the picture, I smelled them.
Yeah, exactly. I tasted them, I smelled them, I could feel the texture. So I thought it'd be nice if other people could have that experience. So today, as usual, we're going to basically discuss some Azure updates. We're going to then straight away move into Channel 1 and take a review of what happened out in Channel 1 this week. And then Manuel today is going to cover our discussion for the topic of the week, and that's going to be on Sentinel deployment for free ingestion services. So we've talked about Sentinel many times, and we've talked about free services. Well, Manuel's going to take us through all those free services and show you how many of them are basically linked up.
Yeah, and I'm also going to get some help from a customer who's done some really cool stuff with some of these free data sources and doing some cool cross-referencing that Eric and I got to see yesterday. So it was pretty cool.
Absolutely. Okay, I didn't get to update this. We're actually, I think we're right on the verge of 1,200 team members. If you're not a member of the team, please consider joining. We have a link that you can use to join the team. We'll post that in the chat window. But again, this is the way to, you're on the Azure Hour call. The Azure Hour team is a separate, entirely separate dimension of this call. It's our community for ongoing discussions, dialogue, recordings of our past calls, etc. So you'll have to fill out a form to join that, and then we'll add you in, and you'll see all these links and things over here on the bottom right corner in the box. All of our different channels that you can use to interact with us.
And the recordings is what you really want to make sure you can get to, right? So that's the channel 2. All the recordings and channel 1 where you can ask questions.
Yeah, you know what? It's a good point. I want to bring this up because I've had a lot of customers over the last several weeks become invigorated and interested in Windows Virtual Desktop and Sentinel, and that Azure Focus Hours, number 6, channel 6 there is, we've got some great recordings. Manuel here did a fantastic job on a Windows Virtual Desktop discussion back in June. And if you want to deploy Windows Virtual Desktop, that probably, Manuel, I don't know what you think, but I would say that 95% of the steps that we went through are still valid, if not 100%.
I agree. Yeah. Pretty much nothing's changed, and we did soup to nuts, right? We did the whole thing. So.
Yeah, great place to follow along, hit pause, do what Manuel did, and move on.
Yeah, Eric, and I'll vouch to that. Like when I talk to folks on Windows Virtual Desktop, I actually point them, hey, kind of like next step, right? Before doing a POC, or if the customer wants to do a POC themselves, just point them to that Azure Focus Hours recording. And in fact, one institution just followed along, just did themselves, right? Just following those steps. So that's cool.
That's awesome. That's what we're trying to do, right? Help folks get familiar and be able to help themselves. That's awesome.
And we couldn't have an Azure Hour call without reminding you to extend your meeting out into the future. We don't want to lose you. So go out there when you have a moment and put that out to about, what do we have there, January of 2021? That will work for now.
And we're working on figuring out a way to do this without everybody being on the 2 or CC line of a meeting invite. So we'll get there. I know Eric is right on the cusp. We're all almost there. So we'll figure out a way to get you guys. I think it'll be an event that we'll send out or something. We'll figure it out.
Yes. Okay, I do want to cover this one more time because I got some good information this week on this sign-in errors. Basically, we have several of you who, when you sign up for the team and we add you to the team, you can't get into the team. You get this error. This is a valid. This is basically telling you that Microsoft has found something about your identity that may be compromised, may have had some anonymous IP address activity, unfamiliar locations. I had a customer ask me about this week, and I pointed him to this article And he basically sent back to me saying, "Thank you. You solved a problem that we've been trying to solve for 6 months on, with a similar issue." And so for him, it was his account something had happened to his account back in August, and he was flagged as risky. So he cleared that, and he was able to get into the team. So again, if anyone out there is having this problem and that's not working for you, please let us know. I want to get to the bottom of this and make sure that we have this sort of addressed right out of the gate for new people who join the team.
That's really interesting, Eric. So for that particular customer, the issue had manifested itself on other properties, like maybe even internal properties he was trying to access. And then this was just another one. Other customers have said, hey, this is the only time I've ever seen this. So it looks like there's, like with these fun contextual security risk scenarios, there may be some variability in your experience.
Yeah, exactly. Try and get this link in here, and I keep typing it wrong. Maybe that's good. All right. Okay, so this first update, it's really exciting. Okay, the link in the chat window now works for the Azure team if you need to join the team. If you can't see the link, that's a challenge of a different sort. But anyway, we'll get to the updates here. The first thing we have is, which I find pretty interesting, is we've announced the preview of Azure Shared Disks. So if you're one of those people out there, I know I have historically had many clusters in my environment, whether it be for file servers or SQL servers or whatever it is. We now have a preview where you can create shared disks in Azure for such applications. This is a limited preview. It's currently in West Central only. And it's going to basically have some restrictions that you can see some of those here. If you follow the link, you'll find a few more. An example is proximity placement groups. If you deploy a couple servers, they have to be in the same proximity placement group, which is basically saying I want them as close together as they can be in a particular zone or region. So if you are interested in shared disks, there is a sign up there for the preview. Go ahead and sign up, put in your subscription IDs, and I assume someone will contact you very soon. I signed up myself this morning. Now, if you see these,
I'm sorry, Eric, just real quick, I was going to say, and if you are interested in that and you wanted to share your scenario, I think we'd all be really curious, right? So, I mean, a bunch of scenarios come to mind, but which ones you're interested in? So like which product, what, is it a database cluster? Is it something else? Is it third party? Like, what are you thinking about? It's very interesting to us. So if it's something you can talk about in the forums, hey man, we'd love to see that in channel 1. Just say, hey, look, I'm playing, this is what I intend to play with, right? And then maybe we can all follow along and learn because it's new, right? It's very new functionality.
Steve, I don't think it works in different availability zones because they have to be in proximity placement groups. I think a proximity placement group has to be in a single zone.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing I was going to chime in is that, again, this opens up so many scenarios, right, that maybe before weren't an option, or maybe it required folks to kind of like re-architect. So I'm already thinking of common scenarios in EDU, right? Like, shared disk, clusters for file servers, database servers. So yeah, as more folks start to look at this, right, we can definitely bring this up in future presentations.
Yeah, and a good point. It's also not just Windows. It's Linux. It's anything that can take advantage of shared disks. So with SCSI reservations.
Yeah, and I see people already throwing Oracle in the IAM, right, in the IAM window, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know if there'll be a statement on rack support, right? But one can imagine that this is one of the dominoes that needed to fall for that to happen. So, let's not read in beyond what we've got, which is a private preview for shared disk, and then what follows on ought to be really interesting. And that's part of the reason why we're like, hey, man, let's get to the community and have people share what they're trying to do. Because also, by the way, this may be an anti-pattern, right? Just because this is available might not mean it's the right way to do something.
I love that. Yes, anti-pattern. And just clarification there. It's a preview, not a private preview.
Oh, sorry, public preview.
Yeah, it is public preview. Yes. No, that's a good point, Manuel. Sometimes what we've done in the past on premises isn't what we need to do in Azure. I mean, an example is a SQL cluster. Maybe it makes more sense to use a managed instance.
Yep.
As an example. Speaking of SQL, our next update, I thought was just kind of interesting, is an article that someone from the PG wrote about SQL Server and how it runs best in Azure, and here's why. Basically, the idea here is, I mean, think about before cloud. Microsoft was developing SQL Server in an on-premises fashion. We move into a cloud environment. Well, guess what that product team is doing now? They're fashioning SQL in a awareness of Azure pattern with the ability to take advantage of new services. Who else can create that environment better than Microsoft? And that's the idea of this article. It's a good read. There's a few examples here of how performance is enabled in a new way in Azure, with the Azure Blob Cache as an example for free cached reads. We can automate patching for SQL Server specifically in Azure. It's basically just going to show up as a tab on your SQL VMs. And that can be from Marketplace, or you can bring your own SQL as you have before and add some add-ons, and you'll get those patching capabilities. And then, of course, there's this advanced data security for SQL, and we talked about that on Azure Hour sometime over the last many months. That gives you the ability to basically understand database vulnerabilities and anomalous activities, those sorts of things. So that's just 3 of many that are listed in that article. So take a look at that. Okay, the next update we have here is Private Link. Private Link we've talked about several times. This one's kind of becoming ubiquitous across the services, and it happened rather quickly. This was first announced in preview, maybe
October? Maybe even a little before. Yeah, I mean, I know we've been working on this for a while for the past services, but it's been pretty quick though to roll out as it hits GA service by service. It's been nice.
Exactly. Yeah, and so we added a new one. The announcement this week is Azure Key Vault is now available in preview for Private Link. If you're not familiar with Key Vault, it's basically a hardware security module. If you do the standard version, if you do the non-standard version, I think it's just called Key Vault. Then it is in software, but it emulates a hardware security module. So interesting new capability there. That means that I can access my Key Vault, my hardware security module, across my private VNet in Azure and from on-premises.
So yeah, this is the fun times when you have that conversation with the CISO and the security team. You're like, well, all the protocols are encrypted. Everything's fine for how we access Key Vault or any of these other services, and they push back and say, no, I want it behind my moat, right? Their castle and moat. They want it on a private network. And they're saying, no, I won't use this if it has a public endpoint. And now we can say, okay, we've got a private link endpoint that is exposed on the VNet. And so this workload, this code, this Kubernetes, container instance that needs to access a value out of the Key Vault does not have to go to a public endpoint. It can go to this private endpoint. And same is true for the other services, right? And like we talk about patterns, anti-patterns, and optimizations, sometimes I got to be honest with you guys. Sometimes it frustrates me that we keep doing this IaaS networking stuff for our PaaS services, because it allows people to, it allows customers to architect dependencies upon additional things that the PaaS service doesn't present. But for secure scenarios, maybe scenarios where you're just battling the security folks and they want private networking, it does light that up. And it isn't just all negative. It's good stuff too. But sometimes I get a little frustrated because everybody's trying to force IaaS networking into PaaS worlds. But it's all good.
Yeah, and we, of course, at Microsoft and the Azure team are all about hybrid. So besides just, I get those challenges with infrastructure as a service, but in terms of hybrid, it's a pretty cool capability there.
For sure. Yeah, because these are routable, right? So unlike the previous iteration that would not be, for example, accessible across an express route or a VPN link, these are. So even if you wanted to call that Key Vault from on-premises over the private network, you could do that now with the private endpoints.
Yeah, and you can see there in this post or in this update, there's a list of all the current ones that are now available. So there's a whole gamut of capabilities there. And if you're new to the team or you're new to the idea of a team, all this is going to be posted in channel 4, important links. So it's all out there right now.
On to page 2.
Yeah, so Kubernetes. We've talked about Kubernetes. Everybody knows about Kubernetes. We have this offering in Azure called AKS, which is our Kubernetes as a service solution. This announcement is just that Kubernetes on Azure is now available in Azure Stack. And so if you're not familiar with Azure Stack, it's basically Azure in your own data center running on your own hardware. It is something that you can purchase from some of our partners like HP, Cisco, Dell, some others, and it is Azure. And it will look like Azure and it will act like Azure, and now you can run AKS in Azure Stack. And then the final one here, which I thought was really interesting, that I just became aware of, there was an article this week on it, is this idea of native Azure Active Directory authentication support for an Azure VPN client. Now, if you've deployed an Azure VPN client before for a point-to-site connection, you basically had to deploy a VPN gateway, and then you would set up some certificates, and you would download the VPN client and make sure your certificates are on place. You could use a public certificate, or you could make a certificate of your own. And that had some limitations because your client just authenticated with a certificate. With this new capability, and I do have it set up, Manuel, I could show my screen really quick. I'll just show this really quickly here.
Yeah, go ahead and do that.
So what happened is I am in our office in Fort Lauderdale, and literally 2 minutes before the call, the power flashed here and I lost my connection to the internet. But it's back online now. And I'm going to share my desktop here. Let's do that really quickly.
And while Eric does that, if you already have a VPN gateway deployed for a site-to-site VPN, that same VPN gateway, as long as it's a current generation, there may be some additional requirements, Eric, but I'm assuming if it's a current gen VPN gateway, it can also do point-to-site. So your site-to-site VPN tunnel can also do point-to-site. So if you already have a site-to-site, you may not need to stand a new one up so that you can play with this.
Exactly, yeah, and so it does require the any SKU that's not basic.
Okay. Yeah, and while you're bringing that up, Eric, another, this is the exact scenario I was a customer we were discussing, is that they wanted to use point to site to access a workload that's running in Azure, and although they have VPN solutions on premises, right? But they wanted to, just like myself, right? I live in Miami, Hurricane Alley, and they wanted to offer the option to be able to VPN into Azure in case they lose, they lose data center, right? So it's great to see that, you get more options for authenticating now.
Yeah, and so here I am on a virtual network gateway. A lot of you on the call have this, and if you take a look, you'll see this point-to-site configuration. Here you will define an address pool that is entirely separate from the address pool on your virtual network, but which is, routable in an address space that you manage, basically. And the new thing here is this Azure Active Directory preview. So if you click on this, it's going to ask you for some information. There's a link in the article that is in the update that tells you how to go about this. But here's the magic of this. It's not just that it's simpler and that it requires authentication. Now you're going to get MFA. You're going to get conditional access. You're going to get all these new capabilities that aren't available with a certificate. So just really kind of brings a new dimension of capability into the VPN client.
Very cool.
Yeah, so I was excited to see that because it's, it's just a new capability that helps. And so, Manuel, I'm going to let you take back over because I know you're going to take the deck anyway. So go ahead and share.
Perfect. All right, so that was the last update. And then we've got some upcoming events. Is this something, Dave, maybe you want to talk to, or?
Yeah, sure. And I think Arnab is also on the call, so he can chime in here as well. The first one we want to just mention real quick to everyone is we have a Power Platform online conference coming up, and I apologize, I didn't put the exact date. I believe is coming up there in March. But again, Power Platform, low-code platform for, in essence, any business analyst, right? No, you don't have to be a programmer to start to develop apps that leverage, all your data analytics, application development, business processes. So definitely, if you're interested in learning more about this Power Platform, highly encourage everyone to join. It's a whole day conference, right, from just getting started all the way to advanced sessions. So Arnab, I don't know if you were able to attend the previous one, but if you want to chime in here.
Yeah, actually, David, I had signed up for the previous one, and that's where I got really excited. Just it was a whole day of events, and it was more focused on Power Automate or Flow, as previously known. But this one is a little different because it's actually going to cover the Power Platform more holistically. So there is going to be a lot of conversation around not just Power Automate, but Power BI and Dynamics and Power Apps. So I think what customers can get out of this event is really the ideas of how you can integrate various problems, as well as not just these three things working together, but how you can use them to even actually get hooks into Azure. So I think it's going to be very exciting.
Yeah, and I just pasted in the chat window an image of kind of like a high overview of the Power Platform, right? What it's composed of: Power BI, Power Apps, Flow, and the different services that you can leverage, right? Whether it's functions, backend, Azure SQL, to really build apps quickly, right? And leverage it for your business. So definitely, I'm probably going to sign up for that one and attend.
Yeah, I'm just going to add a little to that, because if you go out, if any of you have joined the Azure Hour team by filling out the form, a Microsoft form, we actually have Power Automate set up to get triggered when someone fills out the form, and it basically takes some of your data and sends it to myself and Manuel and David, and we set you up in the Azure Hour. Now, the goal, of course, is we're going to have connections with that data to the API for Azure Active Directory to add you as a guest and add you to the team automatically, but that's going to require some permissions that MSIT, Microsoft IT, has to give to me. But it's very possible. It's very easy. I did it in just a few hours. So that's just one example of the power of that platform.
Yeah, just real quick for the other announcements here. I know we've mentioned the containers open hack. Unfortunately, that one is at capacity already. So hopefully some folks in the call were able to register. But again, as more open hacks get announced, we'll go ahead and post those here and inform the community. The in-person technical trainings, they're still open. So definitely, if you see the map below there, if you live close to one of those, you want to attend an in-person technical training, definitely register. You still get that free voucher for the certification exam. And then we also have these virtual training events that the US EDU is advocating. And unfortunately, the February 25th one is full, but we are working on trying to line up the next one for everyone to attend. And that is all for.
All right, so this is the upcoming agenda. This is also posted in the channel for schedule updates. I think it's channel 5, or maybe it's channel 4. Take a look. Anyway, the only thing that we've added new from last week here is that we have a tentative 2 weeks from today. We're going to talk about certification in Azure, and hopefully we're going to release some kind of gamification tool set to this community. So stay tuned for that. If it doesn't happen that week, it will happen. It just might get delayed, but hopefully we'll be able to release that on the 28th and incite some competition and some fun gaming about learning Azure. And also you're going to be eligible for some prizes if you compete well and you focus on it. So obviously the goal is to drive everyone to learn more and to be more interested in the certification, because we can see the value that brings.
Yeah, and
the other one here. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, the one thing I'll add to that is, again, it's all about community, right? So Azure Hour community, being able to join, and learn together, right? So that's the whole purpose. We're offering virtual training. We're going to offer this new service. We're hoping to announce it, and then help everyone learn Azure, right? Make it fun, and definitely let's help you on your certification journey.
Someone can type fast there. I don't know who that is, but you're typing really fast.
I think MR needs to go on mute. Was it Mark? If you can go on mute.
Yeah, Mark was taking notes of all the free certifications.
He's signing up already. He's signing up.
That was impressive. Maybe you should play piano. Here on the 13th is the other update of March. We got our own Clayton Barlow. He's spent a lot of time with compliance. He has some great tips he's going to share with us on the 13th of March.
Awesome. So I'll try to do this, Eric, and we'll see if the wheels don't fall off the bus here. We'll try to head over to Team Channel 1. You seem to be more fluid with this with your client. Let me see if this comes over.
I pinned some things, is why.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you know what occurred to me is maybe I should just use a browser when I go through this, right? But here we go.
Click on your questions and community there, and let's show everybody a tip. Right click on that channel and pin it.
Pin that sucker.
There you go. Now it's going to be at the top.
Right there.
Yeah. So that's my shortcut, and you can see Manuel hasn't looked at a few things here, and that's how you'll know that you're missing some updates where people have made comments and those sorts of things. But let's take a look at what happened over the last week, Manuel.
So let's go up a little bit. Sorry to scroll, folks. Let's see. This looks like this is the first one for this week.
Yeah. So this question came in about governance, and some really good questions around what are character limits for resource groups, subscriptions and resources, and are these restrictions enforceable by policy? Thanks for asking that question. Basically what I did is I responded here with a couple of articles. The first one is we give you recommendations on naming and tagging conventions. So we basically, and this is part of the cloud adoption framework, we give you things to think about, and we guide you along the path, and we give suggestions. So it's a really good article because it says, it makes a suggestion, name all resource groups with RG hyphen and then whatever it is, and it helps you develop a template. And the second part of the question, is this enforceable with Azure policy? Absolutely. And I put a link there of a sample. You basically can use characters that are enforced. So maybe you enforce a part of the name. It must be Contoso, for example, and then you can use question marks and pound signs and other things to require certain types of characters in the remaining part of the name. So take a look at that link. And also for everyone else, just know that it's possible.
Yeah, Eric, the one thing, and I know there's quite a few new folks on the call. The other thing that I would recommend is around governance is to check out that channel that's called Azure Education Governance Series. It's right under channel number 7. And that does have like an 11-part video series on these governance topics, naming convention.
Yeah.
So click on that one all right there, just real quick. And you'll see some of these video recordings that the EDU team made here. And just made them available, right? They're very consumable, 5-10 minutes each. Just go through them, right? Whether you want to learn more about naming convention, whether management groups and policies. We don't do a deep dive, but you'll definitely get enough to know the capabilities around, kind of like the governance tools available in Azure.
You have 2 of them dedicated to naming. So
how many are there? There's 10 videos there, so
11.
Quite a bit of content.
Yeah.
Oh, and the thing that we did with these videos is we tried to pretend that Contoso Education was a some sort of education organization, and they had this scenario and they wanted to accomplish this, and so we kind of went through the process of, okay, based on that, let's do this.
Very cool. Yeah, and I know it's gotten a lot of use. This is out on YouTube actually, so I've seen partners using it, all kinds of folks using it. So that's really good. Back to the questions here. We had an interesting question about managing using Intune. And so thank you, Tim Cornett, one of our peers here on the US EDU team, is like, hey, you know what, the Office and Microsoft Office hours, there's a whole nother community very similar to this around Office and M365. And that might be a forum where you might get more responses to this question around Intune management, but it's a good question.
Yeah, hopefully, Todd, you were able to sign up for that and gain access. They have a very similar format as we do.
Yeah, so props to the Office Hours community. And then Ken had an interesting one.
His question here was about
WVD. Okay, AVD threw me off. It's WVD, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And his question here was about trying to deploy a pool of type remote app.
I see.
And I think, and I just researched this right before the call, Ken, and I apologize that we didn't get to it yesterday. But in your error here, the output says a new app group cannot be created because the host pool name, and if you scroll to the right there, Manuel, it'll tell you, it says it is a personal host pool. And so the idea behind a published application is that you would have many people accessing a published application, and it would be sort of shared infrastructure. So I think, based on a quick response, I think the issue here is that you want to try to deploy a pooled host pool. And so you'll have a shared infrastructure, and I suspect that's the problem.
This might be underdocumented, Eric, because it's funny.
Yeah.
It's logical, and I've hit this as well. But I'm not sure it's really called out in the docs. So this might be a good one to maybe submit for feedback, right? To say, hey, maybe we should add a heads up that if you create a personal assigned host pool, you will not be able to publish remote apps.
Yeah, I think it probably isn't. It's one of those things that you don't think about putting out there. So hopefully, let us know if that solves your problem. That's a great question, and I'm glad that everyone kind of gets to see the results of this. So again, everyone, we really appreciate you interacting in this channel 1 for your questions. It's I personally know that it's not always the most comfortable thing to ask a question that you might think everybody else knows. But I think Azure provides an opportunity to be pretty safe because it changes every day, and I seriously have to look things up to be sure every day. I don't know, Manuel, David.
We just had that.
But that's
we just had that happen. We just had that happen on our team, Eric. Between our cloud solution architects, somebody posted, "Hey, the Windows Virtual Desktop host pool scaling script got updated." And I posted a warning back saying, hey, look, it sounds like it's serverless, but it needs a VM. So just remember to tell your customers it needs a VM. Well, I didn't read carefully. It actually is serverless now. It used to require a virtual machine. Now it doesn't. And so upon rereading and re-reflecting and reading more carefully, I realized, oh, we did actually go full serverless on that. That's really, really cool. So I had to go back to my team, my peers, and be like, hey, my bad, guys. I kind of jumped the gun on that. But it's a point that we're all doing this every day, and there is nuance. The cheese moves usually to a better spot, but the cheese does move on you.
And here's an example: the question that we just reviewed about Windows Virtual Desktop. I wouldn't have known that without the question being asked and brought up in the community. So, I mean, when you bring these things up, you're not only helping each other and yourselves, you're helping us help
That's
you.
Right.
So.
You're making us better too, so yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you for all the activity. We'll get into the topic of the week. It's going to be Azure Sentinel, but I think we had, you know what? Let me take a step back. We did have some folks on the during the week. I don't know if that's a hidden slide. Give me 1 second. Let me just hop out of here because I do want to see.
Oh, that slide is hidden by default.
Yeah, it's hidden by default. It's my bad. Hold on,
Because we had the
unhide that.
Wildcats on it from last week.
Yeah. So I just want to bring this one up just because we did have a really cool hands-on lab. So I wanted to shout out to the Georgia Tech team and the Atlanta, Georgia, and by the way, University of South Carolina came out too. They drove and stayed in the hotel and everything. Spent 2 days with us. Rich, myself, Joey Brakefield, and Todd here in the corner, and John, the ATS is in region. We did a 2-day, hands-on lab, kind of in the hackathon format where there was a goal. And after the morning session on Tuesday, we actually broke those tables up into working groups. We had 5 different teams working together, collaborating to achieve an objective, and we were acting as proctors. And it was really, really cool. They had to set up, tenants. They had to set up host pools. We actually did, for the first time that I've done with kind of a hands-on lab with WVD, we actually had them create a custom image, right? Which is something that a lot of times we end up glossing over and say, hey, just use the one that comes from the gallery, right? No, we actually set up one, had the attendees install whatever third-party app they wanted to try. And then we published that third-party app. So it was really, really cool to get that done. A lot of good Q&A. We had partners in the room sharing some of their experience from real-world WVD deployments. So I thought it was really, really good. And we're trying to build this into an official Microsoft hackathon. So stay tuned. If we can get that done, we will definitely be doing some EDU-focused WVD hackathons like this. So we're excited about that. All right, so let me jump over to our Sentinel discussion today. So we've covered Sentinel a few times in the past, but I don't want to assume that folks have seen this content. So briefly, I'm going to run through a little bit of an overview of what Sentinel is. And so, I think you all are facing the realities of just a whole lot of connected devices and items in the digital estate at your institution, right? And it includes everything from IoT devices, your end user cell phones, their private devices at home. Now it's IoT stuff, third-party SaaS applications. This thing I alluded to earlier of the castle and moat is pretty much blown away by this, right? Because you have resources that you have some liability against all over the place, way outside your moat, right? So it gets difficult to try to keep track of these things. And I think the biggest thing is this button here. 44% of alerts are never investigated. I suspect that's higher in EDU, right? Because people are doing multiple jobs, right? And so that's one of the risks that we run is, you know, I remember the early 2000s compliance requirements were around logging. Nobody ever said, I remember initial PCI audits I had to do as a customer, and all it said is you had to log. There was no requirement that anybody look at that log. Well, things have changed, right? And now there are requirements that you actually have standard operating procedures that review alerts, that take action, and then eventually we're going to get to the point where there's going to be automated responses required. So we think about, you know, how can we help the security and operations teams at our institution scale? And I think the clear answer is we can bring some cloud and artificial intelligence to this. And I want to cover a couple of terms that get thrown around, and we use them as well. And so SIEM is a security information and event management solution that a lot of people have. Some of the things that come to mind with that is like Splunk, and there's a few other third parties that are out there. And then typically there's either a separate or add-on product called that's in the SOAR category, that's security, orchestration, automation, and response. So one does the logging and perhaps raises alerts. The other can help with the automation of response to those alerts, including full automation responses like locking user accounts, closing firewall exceptions, etc. Sentinel is both of these things together. And so it's important to note that this does both SIEM and SOAR activities in one solution that's cloud-based. And so, you know, the idea is to deliver value to your folks that are defending the environment. It scales at cloud scale and uses AI and automation to improve processes. This is kind of the gamut of what Sentinel does, but what we're going to focus on today is the first step, because we can't detect, investigate, or respond to incidents and activities that we don't collect on. And so the good news is that there are log ingestion types that are free with Sentinel, which is hard to believe, right? So you've got systems generating logs. Some of these logs can be ingested at no cost, and the retention is 90 days out of the gate at no cost for these types. And so we're going to focus today on getting started and getting that collection going. Then after I do that, I'm going to pass the baton to a customer who's done some really cool stuff to kind of show, once you start collecting data, what can you do with it? And so we'll go through also some roadmap items. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but it'll be in the deck in case you all want to reference that. You know, we're going to focus today on log into the Azure portal, create your Sentinel instance, and connect your free ingest sources, right? And if you do have some questions about what are these things that are free, here it is in black and white. So you'll have your link that you can go to tell management, here it is in black and white at Microsoft's site. This is what is supposed to be free, right? Because there's always question, is it really free? Is it freemium? What's going on? There you'll have it in black and white. This from that FAQ page, this is what is free, right? So it's quite a few types of ingest. The main ones we're going to cover today are the Azure Activity Logs and Office 365 audit logs, and I might jump into a threat protection scenario as well. Layout of the deck, I'm not going to go through this, but for each of the free sources, I basically put in what's in the docs and a link to the docs, so you have a quick slide to just get you started for each type. So just, you know, just quick and easy, you can kind of go through and say, okay, these are the steps I have to do for each one of these. Some of them are in preview. I marked the ones that are in preview. A couple of them are in preview. And so some of them also require, like the advanced threat protection, require that you have licensing in M365. You know, maybe Azure AD P2 for some of them. That's on the, if you think about it, that's on the signal generation side. That's not Sentinel, that's source side. But without that type of license, there will be no log generated and therefore nothing to bring into Sentinel. So that's all laid out in the requirements, and we discussed those. So anyway, that's it for the slide deck. Let's head over to demo land. So I'm going to bring open a user account that I've got. I went ahead and created a new tenant, and I want to show you actually something that's interesting. I use Edge Chromium Edge, and I wanted to point out this really cool functionality that I discovered early days, allowing you to be able to set up different personas with their own cache credentials, etc. This is really, really useful for demoing. And so I am a total fan of that. I just want to call that out for those of you that have to do demos or perhaps carry different credentials and different personas for different test scenarios. I love that functionality in Edge Chromium. So anyway, let's go ahead and look at how we create a Sentinel workspace. So I go ahead and click on create a resource in the Azure portal. If I type Sentinel, you'll see Azure Sentinel comes up. And when I click create, it's kind of weird. Instead of taking me directly to creation, it actually takes me to Sentinel workspaces. If there were no Sentinel workspaces, there would be none here. And I would just click add. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to add a Sentinel workspace. And what's ingrained in Sentinel is we actually need an underlying log analytics workspace. So we don't really tell you this, but what's happening is in order to create a Sentinel workspace, you need a log analytics workspace. So let's go ahead and create one because this is new, right? Let's say that we're doing everything new. So I'll create a new resource group. So Azure Hour Sentinel 2. Okay, okay, maybe 3 because I already created that one. And then we'll go ahead and give this log analytics workspace a name. So I'll call it Azure Hour Sentinel 3 as well, so it's consistent. I'll probably drop this in a region that's pretty proximate to where most of my workloads that are region specific are running. When we think about Azure AD and all the threat protection and all that stuff, that's region agnostic. When we think about things like Azure virtual machines and other things that we might be doing, well, okay, that's usually based out of some region. So I might pick a region that's where I generally have planted my flag in Azure, my primary flag. So in my case, let's say it's these two. So then I go to the pricing tier, and you'll notice you don't have any options here unless you were an OMS customer. I think that's almost rolling off. I believe this summer that program is ending. So very shortly, all of you will only have one option, which is the pay-as-you-go per gigabyte starting in 2018. We started that process. So really, it's a little distracting. There is no option here. It's pay-as-you-go. Now, it says pay-as-you-go, but I want to call out that we do have reserved capacity options. If you love Sentinel and you start ingesting a whole lot of stuff, other sources that are not free, you can actually do commits like you do for virtual machines for capacity for both Sentinel and log analytics ingestion to help drive down that cost. I think it's up to 70%. So that's another thing to look at, once you get to scale, once you see value out of this. So go ahead and click review and create. It validates, make sure there's no problems, and it'll go ahead and create the analytics workspace. For me, that took almost a minute, so that we don't have to sit around and wait. What I'll do is I'll go back to my workspaces, and I'll go ahead and select my Azure Hour Sentinel workspace that's already deployed, so I don't have to wait for that to bake. And we'll come over here. This is the Sentinel user interface. I'm not going to get into hunting. I'm not going to get into events, right? What I want to show today is how you connect sources. So we're going to go to the data connectors, and pretty quickly we'll see I have 0 of them connected. Okay, so I got nothing coming in. Let's start with some of the free stuff. The first thing alphabetically is Azure Activity Log. I know that that's free. So let's come over here and see what's involved in connecting that. So let's open the connector page. And by the way, Eric, are you able to hear me okay? I've been rambling.
Yes, I
Okay,
can hear you.
I want to make sure there aren't any problems because I don't want to be talking to myself. All right, so configure. So pretty easily here it says the workspace. You need read and write permissions to the workspace to be able to do this. Cool. I happen to be a subscription owner, so I know that I've got read-write access to this log analytics and Sentinel workspace. So I'll configure activity logs. And we can see here it'll list all the subscriptions that I have access to. And in this particular case, it's just the Visual Studio subscription. I can see that it's not connected. So let's go ahead and click that and say, let's go ahead and connect it. So, sorry, I had a deployment come up in the background. So let's go ahead and connect that. And that's it. So now, the activity log for any changes or any operations occurring against that subscription in Azure are now rolling into the Sentinel workspace. So that was pretty easy and free. Okay, cool, right? So let me refresh this, and then in a moment we should see that one connected. Now,
one thing to add here is. Again, you saw how easy this is, right? You're connecting a platform service directly into Sentinel. Many folks that are running on-premises type solutions, right, like firewalls, Palo Alto, Cisco's, you will see options for those here as well. Many of those will require a Linux VM with a syslog proxy, right, that will ingest those logs. Again, we're showing you kind of like the easy button, right? Where these built-in connectors that just as long as you're authorized, you'll be able to connect those services.
The other thing to note is that these other, like Palo Alto and these other third parties, they come with actual workbooks as well. So not just the ability to ingest, but also some queries that are pre-built for high value alerts and results, right? So of course, those are not free, right? So there's cost to the ingested logs. And so I'm not focusing on those today. Today was billed as the free stuff. So we're going to focus on that. If there's interest, by the way, we already did a focus hours deep dive on Sentinel, and that's in the focus hours recordings. So definitely check that out if you're interested in some more of the scenarios. So the next one I want to look at that's high value is Office 365, because goodness knows there's a lot of activity in my Office 365 tenant, and I'd love to have that information in here. So we look at this and say, okay, I need read and write permissions to the workspace, and I need global admin or security admin in the workspace tenant. Okay, cool. Now this one is kind of interesting because when I go to add a tenant, I actually get to an authentication prompt that allows me to be whatever identity I need. This is interesting to me as I work through all the data sources, because this is one of the few that allows you an opportunity to have, for example, the Azure AD or Office 365 global admin sitting next to you and provide these credentials without having to have that individual have access to the underlying Azure Sentinel workspace, right? Some of the other scenarios, you don't get this intermediate prompt, so that user that's doing the operation to connect the source must also have that role in the foreign data source, right? So in this case, Office 365 is great because it lets me be somebody else. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in as the administrator, and what it's saying is, hey, look, you're going to now authorize the this application to hit the Office 365 ASI app. Read activity, read service health, and sign in and read user profile. So it's basically information around the user profile, what activity is going on in the organization, and look at the directory data. It's important to do that so it understands the relationship between delegated mailbox, et cetera. You'll see there's some really cool rules associated with this. So it says, okay, cool, we successfully onboarded the tenant to the workspace. Cool. If I refresh this, I'll see that tenant. That's the tenant ID for my Office 365 deployment. Cool, I'm done, right? No. I'm not done. This happened to me the first time when this stuff was in private preview. I'm like, okay, cool, I'm done. And the next day I had no logs. Well, you need to check the box for what kind of logs you want to bring in. So I'll go ahead and enable SharePoint Online and Exchange Online logs and go ahead and back out of that. And now that's set up. Oh, hold on. Let me hit save, which is here. Save here. Sorry, UX. So save. See how non-obvious that is? It even got me. So just make sure that after you add the tenant, you click enable the SharePoint and Exchange logs and click save. Otherwise, you haven't done anything.
Hey, no, the other, if you go back to Office 365, yeah. the other, again, this may not be in all environments, but just to call it out, right there, you have the option to add additional tenants, right? So again, if you have, as long as you have access to that other tenant, you can certainly add to connect them, wire them up right over here to Sentinel.
And so we'll do that right now. I've got another tenant. If I can remember the password, I'm going to go and authorize that. And just like David said, that's a great point. I meant to bring that up and I forgot. Customers ask, hey, what happens if my organization is a little fractured or we have more than one Office 365 tenant? Not a problem, my friends. Go ahead and bring over the data from multiple Office 365 tenants into a Sentinel workspace. We just configured that. Go ahead and save that. Very, very good call out, David.
Yeah, and the other thing, because this happened to me as well, is you add the tenants right here in the configuration. Don't expect the data to start flowing like immediately. Sometimes it takes a few minutes for the data to start coming through it. Don't get frustrated. It will start to flow, and you'll be able to see that here under data received.
And there's a little indicator here, green, that it shows it's connected. And then eventually you'll see data received, data points coming in, right? Like David said, it can take several hours for that to start to come over, but it'll come over, don't worry. So let's, with that, the rest of them are fairly straightforward. I'll show you what a couple, let me see what another one looks like. Maybe let's do Azure Advanced Threat, Azure ATP, for example. If I open this connector page, this one's a little more simplistic, right? It's saying, okay, you need read, write, and permissions, and you need security admin or global admin in the workspace tenant, and say, yes, I'd like to go ahead and connect. Now, in my environment, I do not have, I believe, the licensing required. So I think I end up failing validation. For you all that have the ATP licensing, you'll have that succeed, right? So that's kind of a poor demo for me because I don't have those licenses in my environment. But it is that simple. Yes, go. And then the other thing you may want to do is, based on the data that comes back, you may want to automatically create incidents so that those get surfaced. And actually, that's a good segue, I think, to get into showing off what a customer has done in this environment. So let me flip back over here to my slide deck, and I want to advance over and introduce Gonzalo